Kintsugi Heroes acknowledges funding and was made possible with support from the Community Broadcasting Foundation. Find out more at cbf.org.au. Welcome back to Kintsugi Heroes, helping people tell the stories they need to share so you can find the stories that you need to hear. This week, John Millam is joined by Wayne Wigham, a man who faced deep struggles with depression both during his successful football career and beyond. After tough transitions and personal setbacks, Wayne found hope through the support of his teammates, a sense of purpose in the fire brigade, and the right treatment at the Black Dog Institute. Wayne shares how he turned his life's challenges into a mission to help men redefine masculinity and embrace mental health. His story is one of courage, hard work, and the power of seeking support. Enjoy this one with Wayne Wigham.
So, ladies and gentlemen and listeners, welcome back to Kintsugi Heroes, our podcast of where we capture stories that matter from out and about in the world, in the Australian community. And today we have a ripper story, right? And I'd like to introduce Wayne Wigham. Welcome to Kintsugi Heroes, Wayne.
Thank you for having me.
Mate, you're more than welcome. And of course, Wayne, you're coming out to us after many years of storytelling. In fact, you'd probably be one of the few blokes in the country who has sort of, dominated the last, 17 years working for Black Dog and talking to men and telling stories. So an amazing track record, brother.
Yeah, well, after many years of misdiagnosis and struggle, the Black Dog finally diagnosed me correctly. And just around that time, they only had about 20 people working for them. And just out of the blue, they needed someone to go to the mines and start talking to men in mines. And because I understand men fairly well, because 10 years football and 10 years in the fire brigade, I know them pretty well. So I went up and lived on a mining camp for a week and was doing underground and open cut. And that was my first experience talking to men. And that was, just over 17 years ago.
It's amazing, like a trailblazer in this sort of meeting men where they need to be, where they are and talking about the real stuff in life. How on earth, like you mentioned, 10 years of footy, 10 years of fireman, right? You were playing back in the 70s and 80s, top level rugby league. How'd you get to that place, to being a young man at the top of a big sport?
Basically, my dad, put me into rugby union when I was about under eights. And even though I was suffering depression even back then and was a really quiet, sooky child, I just took to rugby union like a fish to water. And it turned out I could run a bit. And it was my life, actually. In hindsight, it was that probably saved me, the exercise, the sport, and the mateship. So I just started playing rugby union. I was pretty good at it. Then when I was about 14, where I grew up, North Ryde was a pretty rough area. And I was getting picked on a lot. I was getting into a lot of fights because no one really knew me because I was a rugby union player and they were all rugby league players. And someone said, if you join the local football club, you'll be protected and you won't be picked on so much. So I started playing rugby union on the Saturday and then rugby league on the Sunday. At first, they wouldn't put me on for about 3 or 4 weeks because I seemed like a bit of a crybaby to them. And I was always running away from school and crying at school and hiding away. And then when I finally got on, I think they got a bit of a shock. I used to say in my mind, universe or my God or whatever I said, you've given me a rotten brain, but you've made up for it by giving me a good body for sport. I took to rugby league very well, just went through the junior reps. Then I tried out for the under-23s in a trial match. Then I went on reserve grade that same day. And Rex Mossop was calling the game that night. And I scored a try into the post just after Rex Mossop. And at the same time, Rex Mossop, the old football caller, he was walking into the ground. But I didn't know that. Anyway, the next day I went back and I played for my local football club. And I'd been on the drink that night. And everyone said, you see the Rex Mossop show this morning? I went, no. Apparently Rex Mossop got on there and said he saw a young bloke who was going to be a first grader. And that night, the phone rang off the hook. Every club in Sydney started ringing. So I was really blessed. If Rex Mossop didn't walk in at that particular time, probably would have taken me a lot longer to make it, or I might not have made it.
Yeah.
But then I just got a contract and just played in the first grade game when I was still in high school, and really just went from there.
Wow. You mentioned like seeing yourself as a bit of a crybaby and stuff. Of course, that's how people assessed somebody struggling with, say, depression or anxiety at the time. When did you first realize that something was going? You said you gave yourself a oh, I've got a buggered brain. When did you start thinking that things weren't right?
Mum, mum and dad knew there was something wrong when I was young, crying a lot, hiding in my room. I just was generally sad, but I had no idea what it was. So mum first took me, she took me to Ryde Mental Health Centre, the Ryde Community Centre, but they just sedated me back then, and that just made me fall asleep at school, so gave that away. And really, look, I just was genuinely sad a lot of the time, but I had no idea. When I was playing football, I thought I was just a selfish, evil person
Mm.
didn't appreciate anything. Why was I sad like this? I had great friends. I was a surfer. I surfed all summer, played football in winter. But sometimes I remember once I was with my mates who were just about to surf. I was with all my friends. Surf was good. And I just came over with this overwhelming despair. And I didn't know why. I was thinking, I'm with my friends. I'm with the surf. How can I feel like this? And it nearly overwhelmed me because I just did not know what the hell was wrong. But in hindsight, because I was training so much for sport, the endorphins and, the burning of the cortisol, it
Yeah,
actually did save my life. I think back now and think that if I couldn't play sport, I don't know how I would have got through in hindsight.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because not only did it give you the physical support, but the tribe, right? The connection, the power of having another bloke, even if they're not talking, but at least they're shoulder to shoulder with
And I think it surprised me. I couldn't understand it because, I was always nervous and scared at school just from being found out. But
you.
when I got on the football field, to be honest, I was pretty fearless. So it was a real contradiction within myself. And I didn't understand it, how I could be one way. Yet
Yeah,
when I get out there, I used to think, well, nothing's worse than feeling depression. So everything else is easy. And even when I was training, when I started to get tired, I thought, if I can't get through this physical pain,
yeah,
how am I going to get through the mental pain that I'm secretly suffering? So it made me train harder. Um, it made me want to beat that pain out of fear of not being able to beat the other.
yeah,
So I think it helped me in hindsight a lot. I mean, at the time, I didn't know this, but now I know a lot about it and look back, I can make real sense of it. And exercise, obviously, is a massive help when you are struggling.
yeah,
I think that really got me through, to be honest.
yeah, yeah. And it's fascinating. Like you've gone onto the paddock, you've been a member of a team, and you've sort of normally depression can be very isolating, right? So how did you manage to connect and sort of follow and join in on the team stuff?
Look, many of the men who are the hardest men are the softest underneath. And surprisingly, many of them have high emotional intelligence.
Yeah,
So, you tended to bond with those who, in hindsight, may have been struggling as well.
yeah,
So, became great mates with quite a few of them. And I think because I did suffer depression, I was friendly and I had empathy. So, I kind of got on with everybody. Just, I could just see everybody for what they were, and I saw good in everybody. So I really just, even when I was, a football star, we'd all drink with the under 23s, the reserve. We all drunk together. Balmain was really inclusive. We had people of all cultures, all socioeconomic backgrounds, all religions. And I think we just learnt to accept each other. In hindsight, again, it was actually beautiful.
mm, mm. Yeah, an early model for like some really, and of course the Balmain during that time had some great success as well. So it wasn't just a good model; it was actually quite effective.
Yeah, and like in our backline there, like we had Polynesian, Maori, Polynesian, Indigenous, Lebanese. I think at one point I was the only Caucasian in our back, but we never saw each other like that. We just saw each other as teammates. And we really, really were close. Other clubs were jealous of us because we didn't have cliques. We all drunk together. Um, it was a wonderful experience. If anything, it made me come out the other end a bit naive to the world. When you go straight into a thing like that where your handshake's your word, you have each other's back from a young age, when you come out the other end, you're really a sitting duck to be taken advantage of because
Yeah.
you believe the whole world's like that. And I think a lot of the footballers do get taken or make some dumb decisions out of trust and
Yeah.
thinking the world's like that when they come out at the other end. And a lot of footballers do start to suffer depression or have mood disorders because they stop training. And all of a sudden, what was covering their grief, give away training and everything hits you. So you hear a lot of sportswomen and sportsmen struggle after their careers. And it's not really the end of the career so much. It's more stopping of the exercise, which was masking or helping with the mood. Back then, like Olsen Filipano was my inside centre. He came out later on and said that he was suffering depression at the same time. Dennis Bendel, he's half Japanese. He was struggling. Percy Knight, who's Indigenous, I lived with him for a few years. He was struggling. So we found out in later years that all of us really, like there was four of us together and four of us had our own demons for various reasons.
Yeah.
That we're all struggling and hide. And it really, later, 10, 15 years ago, we kind of sat down and we couldn't believe that we're all hiding it from each other so well. And men are good at hiding it.
Very good. Very good. It's incredible. And of course, you mentioned the transition so many sportsmen make from that tribe, that connection, a place where, support is available and and validation is available, even if it's not stated. And then out in the real world, you mentioned you were naive. How did that transition, go for you?
I left rugby league and went straight into the fire brigade. And I was in the first fire brigade rescue squad. Because I had a purpose, like I felt like I was doing something for society, and I needed that. I'm a good Aries boy. I need that. For me personally, if I don't have a purpose, I fall. So that helped a lot.
Yeah.
And I did go back and play A grade with my old friends that I grew up with. So I kind of gave up the professional when the pressure of the professional rugby league to go back and have fun and had the fire brigade. Again, in hindsight, um, that really helped that I didn't go straight from a team environment to no team environment. But then I did do a couple of inventions. We invented something, to warn people if they took their seatbelt off in the back seat in buses. And I got robbed a bit doing that because I just took a handshake as a bond. I lost faith in humanity a bit. You tend to, you have to go through your lessons, I think. I think all of us went through that time when you feel that all humans aren't in that team. So I did I did learn my lesson the hard way, but that's the university of life. And it was a naivety of believing people for their word. So yeah, learned my hard lessons there, but you had to. Um, and just got wise as we all do, and we all as we get older. I
We
did
hope.
start to self-medicate. Then I was drinking a fair bit in the fire brigade just because I was still getting the overwhelming feelings of sadness. Still didn't know what it was. Turned to drugs, lost my marriage, ended up in 4 public psych hospitals, still misdiagnosed. Things got pretty grim. I turned into a recluse for 5 years.
What were they diagnosing you as having?
Oh, just different types of depression or anxiety, or I don't, back then, to be honest, it was pretty generic. Doctors didn't really understand it very well. So tended just to hand out the same type of medication to everybody.
Yeah.
And it did help some people, but others it didn't. So the science of depression really only started in about 2000 in Australia when the Black Dog were the first people to open up. And then the different types of depression and the different diagnoses became more public and there was more awareness. So you had a much better chance to get diagnosed correctly. And anyone today, if you tell the truth about how you're feeling, you've got a really good chance of being diagnosed correctly. And that's everything, like any illness.
Yeah.
Hitting it on the nut, and then if you know the enemy, you can fight the enemy. When you don't know what it is when you go into a panic because you think this will never end.
So it sounds like, the discipline of your choices. So, the fire brigade is a big, has a lot of training and discipline attached to it as well. So that had kept things together, although you were finding it harder and harder and being in the system and struggling to get a decent response and, self-medicating. That's quite a lot to deal with. Did that lead to a crisis point?
Well, it did. As I said, I ended up in 4 public psych boards. I think I've been in every one in Sydney, like Hornsby Hospital, Ryde, North Shore,
Concord.
Manly. I can give you a star rating on each public psych ward if you want one.
Yeah, TripAdvisor for the wards, right? So
Yeah, I can. I can tell you everything about them. But really, again, the public system wasn't great back then. There was no real diagnosis. They were really just holding cells to keep you safe.
yeah,
Eventually, as I said, Dr. Gordon Parker from the Black Dog, I was totally suicidal by then.
mm,
I did have a suicide attempt. And anyway, Gordon Parker, mine's treatment resistant, my depression. I ended up having 18 ECT treatments.
wow,
And at the same time, they changed my meds. And I was beginning to panic because after about 16, nothing was happening. I was still pretty suicidal.
yeah,
And then one day I kind of went for a run. They let you go for a run from North Ryde Psych Centre when I was up there at the time. And I got back from the run and I sat in the back porch at my mum's place. And all of a sudden I went, gee, the trees look green. The sky looks blue. And I said, gee, I think I feel normal.
wow,
And all of a sudden it was like, whoa,
wow,
it was the first time in my life that I didn't have the dark cloud hanging over me. And it gave me hope. Because if you do believe that you can't get well and that'll never end, that's when people struggle. And that's just not the truth. But there are many, many men out there who have tried to get better once or got help once. And when it doesn't work, they've given up.
yeah,
And that's one of the big messages that we have to spread, that, if it doesn't work the first time, you go back, because it's not an exact science. What works for me might not work for you. So they do have to play around with it. So if you have gone and got help and you still feel rough, go back. That's really the big message, because you will get over it if the right diagnosis, and you do what you have to do, what they tell you to do.
yeah. That's that discipline you got to hold on, and keep turning up to training, or keep turning up to treatment. Yeah,
And if they tell you to practice gratitude or to exercise or to do whatever, if you don't do it, you won't get well. It's like if you go to the gym, go to the personal trainer, and it gives you a workout routine and you don't do it, well, you're not going to get physically fit. With our minds, you have to practice loving yourself and all the things they tell you.
yeah.
You've got to practice it. And if you do, you can change the way you think, and you know what to do when you do go down. You can know the mental skills to drag yourself back up. And it's really important to understand that.
So you've been sharing that message, right, from your lived experience for 17 years, and you share it not in their sort of manicured way. You go out with hard-toed boots on and get down and dirty with blokes who have probably never had a real sort of sit down and chin wag about self-love in their lives, right? So how does that go, man?
No, look, in my mind, I always imagined, because I know it because I've lived it, and I've lost mates from suicide, and I had rough mates. Some of the toughest men in the world suffer. I mean, blokes who would take a bullet for you in a second. It's got nothing to do with bravery. So in my mind, I always just said, right, I'm going to talk to you like you're my best mates or my family, and I got to tell you what I know.
Yeah,
So I always, in the back of my mind, that's how I talk. I understand that we're also overwhelmed with information. We just want to hear, what the hell is it? Am I weird? And what do I do? And if we need to help someone else. So I really keep it straight, basic, the truth. My Black Dog presentation is based on research, but I can add the lived experience bit in. And when I do my own stuff, I really just talk a little bit. I really simplify it. I think that's what we have to know. It's just a message. It's the truth. And I know it's an illness, and I just got to convince we've got to convince all men that that's all it is. And so that's in my mind. That's how I play it. And I was never scared because I played first grade for 3 different clubs. I know men, and I knew those hard men at the mines. I knew underneath they were good blokes and would listen. I got called a soft cock and a few things out there, but always there would be someone get up and go, no, I've got it. And sometimes it'd be the biggest bloke with the most tattoos and the meanest bloke.
Yeah.
And even when I did the Indigenous communities, there'd always be an elder or someone get up and say the same thing. Because once you break the dam, someone will help you, always. I don't think I've never been left posted with that kind of stuff. And I didn't care being called that. And because I knew that I was a hard man for doing it. I'd say, take the hit for the family, brother. If you put your hand up, your kids will.
Yeah.
So I think it's masculine. So a little bit of redefining masculinity in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Probably a little bit ahead of the curve on that, man.
Well, yeah, because I'm a hard man, but I'm a soft man, and I'm proud of that. I'm not going to change, And I know that most of us are. We can be as hard as nails, all of us. Or we can make a choice to be kind and open, So it's a lifestyle choice, I tell people.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
doesn't mean you're not the toughest bloke or you're not brave or you wouldn't do anything for your family. A lot of blokes think that it make them weak to put their hand up. To me, it's the opposite. And when I do have men say that, oh, I feel weak, I go, brother, you're the type of man I'd march into battle with any day. So, and I feel that. So I just talk straight, probably a bit like a 70s footballer. I'm a bit of a yobbo type, maybe. I don't know. I call myself the black dog bonehead.
Not woke, but definitely awake, mate. So
yeah.
I love that. Interesting. Like what comes to mind is you've been across, like as I've said a couple of times, you were ahead of the curve with some of these conversations and understanding. Have you noticed the message change? Is it more sophisticated? What do we now know that we didn't when you were first sharing these stories?
We know there's more confidence in getting better. Again, the institutes like the Black Dog and others, the research that they're doing on treatments, that's what I love the most. So it was even Gordon Parker, who's the world expert. Back when I started the Black Dog, I remember he said there'd been no real advance in mental health treatment with medication since lithium in 1952.
Wow.
So, the pharmaceutical companies had let us down. But now they're under pressure to come up with better solutions. And the Black Dog are doing stuff with, things like ketamine, electromagnetic therapy, and other treatments the future is much brighter for us and our children, which is a great news. It really warms my heart to know that it is getting more exact science and we are catching up to physical health. So I think it's changed in that way. And look, everyone's heard about it now. I think we talked about it. The awareness is there, but now we've got to nail down into why. Why do I get this? And is it normal? And most depressions are, circumstantial. You cop 3 or 4 big hits in life, one after the other, and all of us are going to fall.
Yeah.
Not to hate yourself because that happens, because that's the way we are as humans.
Yeah, it's very, very reasonable to feel miserable and sad when something miserable and sad has happened.
And you've got to know how to deal with it. We've not been taught, the mental tricks and the science of how to deal with such things. And it can hurt you and it can come and bite you a year later. Some men are still struggling from marriage breakups or things 10 years later. And something that happened to you as a child can come back and bite you if you haven't dealt with it. And I know it sounds, a lot of people think that's bull, but it's true, Our brain can get wired a certain way. But we've learned now that we can unwire and rewire, and that's really important. But to get better, you've got to believe.
Yeah.
If you don't believe, and a lot of people still don't believe, and I think that's the big thing we've got to push, that believe that you can get well. And then when you believe, you'll do the work that you have to do. I think that's the big message now, belief and hard work, and you'll get there. I think they're the big things that have changed now. We can say it with confidence.
Yeah, that's a great message. I love that idea of embracing the potential for healing ourselves. Yeah.
Well, I got depression. I got no shame. I'm going to beat that bastard. What do we do with our enemies? We charge at it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, mate. No, I understand the brave talk of an outside back, but anyway, we'll carry on to the next one.
Glory hound, mate. I'm going for the glory. You know that.
So what I'm fascinated is, mate, because you were diagnosed with melancholia, which is like such an old-fashioned name, but it's it's a very, as you say, treatment resistance, a very deep and fundamental sadness, and it usually stops people from doing life and changing their trajectory in life completely. So what do you think was special about you? How did you manage to fight through and go forward and create, a new kind of career and everything out of it, even after the previous ones?
I think there's great courage in many people out there. You tend just to drag yourself up and keep going through great pain. And so Professor Parker said to me once, I still felt a bit weak within myself, to be honest. And then Professor Parker said to me once, you're really brave to make it this far.
Mm.
And I just think I was brave. And I think anyone who is getting up every day and living with this is super brave. And I just salute you. So we tend to do it. We tend to just get up and keep going. It was brutal. And I did fall in the end after about 40 years, as I said, I did. We tend to self-medicate if you don't get help. I really haven't met anyone who hasn't self-medicated, drinking, gambling, drugs. We can become, we might become a little bit more promiscuous or change our sexual patterns just to try and feel good. So you tend just to do, and that can wreck your life, like it changes you without knowing. And that breaks my heart because I see a lot of men lose their marriages and friendships because they're just, self-medicating in one way or the other. And the self-hatred that comes with a lack of understanding, we can destroy our life.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's something like 80% of marriages break up if one partner has struggling and doesn't get help because the other partner feels helpless and doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And my ex-wife, she apologizes to me for not understanding. I go, well, how could you understand when I didn't?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
don't worry about it. I didn't know. So how could you know?
Yeah, wow. Terrific idea. The idea that all of us can touch that bravery. I think that's such a great message. With when you and speaking of bravery, right? When you go out, as we said, you go out into some places that aren't normally seeing a whole bunch of people sitting down and talking about mental health or well-being or depression or self-compassion or treatment. Right? So when you look at those blokes you're connecting with, they're often, as you like your backline, like from all different walks and different backgrounds and different lived experience. How do you bring that? How do you deliver a message to all of these different types and silos of men and shapes of men?
It don't change. So, for instance, last year I did a drug and rehab centre out in Geelong, which is a low socioeconomic area, and battlers. I'm in that line of work, and I was just a little experiment for myself. I just spoke to them from the heart, like I always do. And then the next day, while I was in Melbourne, I did a job for a cyber security company. They were all on about $500,000 a year, and it was in this restaurant that the food was that good. I didn't even know what I was eating, but it was beautiful. And I never changed the message.
Wow.
So men, no matter who we are, where we come from, what culture, socioeconomic background, we're all the same inside.
Mm.
So if you and the illness doesn't discriminate, it affects us all the same. And even if we live in the biggest house or the smallest house, we're going to make the same mistakes.
Yeah.
We're going to self-medicate. We're going to lose relationships. We're going to hate on ourselves. So, the message is consistent. I never look at men differently because it's irrelevant to me. And, culturally, the Maoris call depression loss of mana, loss of life spirit. The Indigenous have a word that I just can't remember that means basically the loss of life spirit. But we're all the same. It's irrelevant. I always say to men, I can't comment on how you got there, but I can comment on the pain we feel is the same.
Yeah.
So the circumstances may be different, but there'll still be things that hurt us along the way, but nothing's different.
Yeah.
So there is no different. We're all men. I don't care.
Terrific message. I'm interested in, when you're opening up to these different groups of men, right? Blokes have not been great at taking up that challenge of looking after themselves or moving forward with some commitment to themselves or whatever. Whatever, whether they're focused on other things or they have a vision of themselves as not needing it or being too tough. There's a lot of reasons, right? And blokes are complex. What do you do that's different, that sees a level of commitment? Do you get the message through? Are you confident that blokes are making changes?
Well, I'll give them, if they won't, as you said, we're not great at any type of seeking help for any type of help. So, I say if you won't do it for yourself, do it for your partner, do it for your kids, do it to be a better mate, better father, better, partner or whatever. So I try to give them reasons to do it. And we will help our families and we will help other people. Like we'll help each other people when we don't help ourselves in many cases.
Yeah.
So I try to come up with any reason that we should do it. I went to I did a turnout with Shane Webke and Jeff Horn, the boxer. And Shane Webke was there. His father passed in a work accident. So he lectures how we've got to be careful at work. So we come home. And he used that motivation, if you, we're all a bit haphazard in our workplace, but he says, do it so you come home to your family. And I think with mental health, do it so we come home and stay there for our family. And we will be better men ourselves and we'll be better to those around us. And that's a great motivation. And I think any man would put his hand up and admit it if he knew that his loved ones would then follow. Like when I finally got diagnosed correctly and got help, my young bloke put his hand up and said, Dad, I've been hiding it too.
Yeah, wow.
And I'm going to get help now. Now I would give up anything I've ever done in life for that moment. It was worth every little, and I did cop some shit back then, to be honest, just, your hero, what are you talking about this stuff for? Why do you do it? What do you, and I go, because it's my nature, but that's worth it. And, and we can set the example for those around us. And that's brave and that's a good thing to do. And, mate, that's masculine. How masculine do you want to be?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I agree, mate. But then, of course, there's always, anything that's worthwhile often has ups and downs. There's a cost. What's it cost you?
Look, to be honest, back when I was first talking about it and people knew, women wouldn't come near me, to be honest, because I was, I was someone who'd been in psych hospitals. So, and I understood that. So, I was a bit of a pariah. And when I first went back to my football reunions, there were some men that just couldn't come anywhere near me just because they didn't know what to say or, they'd heard the track I'd been. But, I just walked in with my chest out and I understood that was only because they had no understanding at the time. So I copped a hard time off some of the footballers, but there wouldn't be one of them that hasn't rung me since and said, shit, I'm struggling now, or my son's struggling, can never word to him. So that awareness that we talked about, that is, people are more aware. Back then, I don't blame them. I didn't know, I just found out myself. Yeah. And I'd been to psych wards and I had that knowledge. They just didn't. That's all it is, and it's like a bad back. People, if they can't see it, you tend not to get much sympathy back then. But so that was they were the downsides, but it never really worried me. It was interesting for me. Like I think we talked about the curiosity of life.
Yeah.
I found it interesting that, when I was a football star, like I had everyone being nice to me. Yet when I had just come out of, where I'd come, it was complete opposite. Yeah. And it taught me a lot about life, to be honest.
Yeah.
So no, it was all good. It didn't really worry me. I kind of got used to, that kind of thing. And when you do play football, you kind of when you have bad games, you get the shit bagged out of your week. So I was pretty used to that anyway. And I just had that subconscious thing that I knew that it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I just had that purpose, gave me a lot of people say it when you struggle with something. If you go and talk to other people about it, it gives you a reason why you went through it, all that stuff. People do it with all sorts of illnesses and problems. And it's good for me.
Yeah.
For some people, it's not. Some speakers start at the Black Dog or in other places and they just not for them. So it's just, you've got to be true to yourself. And for me, It's good for me. And who knew? I didn't know. And I was just lucky, really. I'm blessed. I'm blessed that I had the opportunity to start doing it. I'm blessed that I turned out that I was, I'm not ashamed. I'm quite good at it. I'll talk to anybody. That was just a fluke, really. But I'm really thankful that I have this opportunity.
Yeah. Well, mate, it's great work. What do you think is the challenge? As you mentioned, right? Awareness has sort of been on everyone's agenda for a while. The numbers are still tough for men, right? We're still losing way too many men in different situations. What do you think is the way forward for us?
Well, we've just got to target why. Like we all know, now we know. Look, men know we're not handling marriage breakups very well.
No.
A lot of men suffer physical and emotional abuse that is just unsaid, and they don't know what to do about it. And they're trying their hearts out, and they're getting a lot of bad things happen at home. We don't talk about it. Loneliness is a big thing. If we can't see our kids, false allegation, general when we leave work, we can lose our identity.
Yeah.
Financial pressures can make us feel like less of a man. So we've got to start viewing ourselves and not judging ourselves, by, how big our house is. Mate, I've been rich and I've been poor, and it's irrelevant. Sometimes I get men ring me up and say, "Oh, I've come out of, I've lost my money, or I've lost my money in divorce, and I feel less of a man." I go, and I'll pick our richest mate. I'll say, "Well, what do you think Billy's doing now?
Yeah.
Sitting at home watching TV. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And what are you going to do in the morning? And what do I think he'll do?" You don't need all that. I mean, go for it, be the best you can be. But as men, we're multi-dimensional characters, and have more pride in yourself. Be proud of yourself being a good bloke, trying to be a good dad, trying to be a good friend. I think we have to learn about that. When I was in the fire brigade, because I was working shift work, I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with my kids.
Mm.
So don't fight with that. If you get that opportunity, wrap it up. Again, in hindsight, I didn't know at the time, but in hindsight, because my ex could work and I had the kids on the day off, again, I'd give up everything for that again. It was beautiful. And
Yeah.
I'm close to them because I had that time. So a lot of this stuff about redefining masculinity and, having times with the kids, I think we should embrace it.
Mm.
And, understand we're great. Dads are great.
Yeah.
And if
Totally.
you can get time with them, you'll never replace it. So, let's have a look at ourselves differently and, not get stressed. And, everyone has bad luck in life. And the other thing I'd say is we've all messed up, made mistakes. So you just forgive yourself. That's the university of life. A lot of blokes make mistakes and can never forgive themselves.
Yeah.
Bugger that. We all have. If I
Yeah.
lived on my mistakes, I would be in trouble.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to forgive myself, to be honest.
Right. Yeah.
Because it was my biggest struggle. But then I went to the university of life. I only knew what I knew at the time. Forgive myself. All that matters is the man we are today, not yesterday. And I know that sounds a bit of a cliche, but it's the truth.
Hey, that's brilliant. I love that. The idea of I'd rather have a purpose than a Porsche, right? I love that. Right.
Mate, I'm dealing with plenty of multi-millionaires who are feeling just as bad as, those of us who struggle. I know, when you don't have to financially struggle and you've got your bills paid, it takes a lot of pressure off. But with depression and mental health, it probably helps 10%, but it's still not going to be the answer.
Still got to get the work done.
You still got to do the work and get the help.
Yeah, and get the help. Two major messages, right? So, you were mentioning you just addressed a group of blokes. You fine local rugby league club, the Kintsugi boys. But what is it? What is it about that really lights your fire?
Well, I understand that life's hard, and that everyone struggles. I understand that, for professional sportsmen, for instance, a professional rugby union player or rugby league player, if they're struggling psychologically and they go get help, everyone thinks what a great thing. And all their teammates will hug them and go, great, because this game is hard and it can do your head in. I've talked to hundreds of professional athletes. Life itself is harder than being a professional sports person, 10 times harder.
Yeah.
So we should be embracing it ourselves. be proud of yourself that you're in a hard game. You have your wins, your losses. So I think that we should look at life as the hardest sport of all and congratulate each other when we're smart enough to go and figure out how to play the game of life better. So, and we can all play better and enjoy life more. Like you can play better and enjoy the game if you get help in sport, and it's the same as life. So, but I just talked to the boys. The Coogee boys, they were mostly transients from England. They come from the country to Sydney. They really don't have a network here. So that particular club joins them together, gives them friendship, purpose. So I just really talked about all the things that we've mentioned about, relationships, even sexuality. We can all, get trouble with our sex lives. We can fail to perform sometimes. And, I really talk everything I know. Now, I've been through it all, by the way.
Yeah.
And so it's just a really open discussion. I went hard. I talked to them like I'm the football coach. But, with the Coogee boys afterwards, there were 3 of them that got up and spoke about their own struggles.
Wow.
And then you could see the other boys go, oh, and that's brilliant because one guy was from England, another guy had come down from the country. So all different circumstances, but where they landed was pretty much the same. So there are consistencies in what is hurting men, but unfortunately, for some reason, it's shut down in the media. It's shut down politically. And we all know it's killing men, but we just can't seem to get it talked about. Those of us in the game call it the great unsaid. The more you try to publicise it, the more you get whacked on the nose, as you know. So I think the next thing we have to do, look, if there's 50% of women who suffer domestic violence, but there's 30% of men, we can't just forget the 30% of men. We should be helping everyone. And I wouldn't care if it was 90% of men and 10% of women. We still should help the 10% of women in everything.
Yeah.
So I really believe that instead of looking at statistics and dismissing one group because their statistics are somewhat lower, that's sick, that's bent, and it's killing us. So as men, we've got to join together, and I think we mentioned we've got to vote for the party that will stop this shutting down of open discussion.
Yeah.
I got one mate, he's ex-army. He suffered such bad domestic violence and he couldn't get help. He went down and had a meeting with the CEO of White Ribbon and said, why aren't you publicising this? So, that's my frustration. It breaks me a bit because it's really hard to get by, but I know it's great meeting you guys because I know that I'm not the only one. You begin to think you're the only one who thinks this until you get around like-minded people.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy to have met you guys just, because together we'll get there. So I think that's a big change we have to make. And I think if we do, we'll save lives straight away. Because if we start publicising it, men sitting at home feeling unloved and unwanted and no help, all of a sudden they'll go, oh, men hate hypocrisy.
Yeah, it's the sense of stoic justice, right? The right thing done at the right time.
And it helps you mentally. It'll help us all. It'll take the pressure valve off, and then we can go to the next level.
Mate, that is amazing stuff. Congratulations on the work you're doing. It's so inspiring. I love the way you step into these conversations with such vigor and fire and commitment. It's fabulous work, mate. And I just want to thank you, Wayne, for sharing your truth and telling us a story that matters, mate. Thank you very much, Wayne.
It's my pleasure, boys. Go get help. Come on, let's change the world together. Sweet.
I'm with you, mate. I'm with you. Hey, thanks, man. Cheers, bro.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Kintsugi Heroes. Thank you to Colin Lilly for permission to use Broken as our theme music for this series. If you enjoyed this conversation, share the podcast with a friend and let us know by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support Kintsugi Heroes and the stories we share, head to kintsugiheroes.com.au and follow the instructions to make a tax-deductible donation. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.